And you mentioned eros and ecstasy. I'm reminded of, in Luke's account of just before the Last Supper, Jesus says to the disciples, I have fervently desired to have this meal with you. And I can't recall off the top of my head, but I remember doing the research that verb in the Greek appears in the New Testament 32 other times. Every other time, it is translated as the word in English, lust. It's interesting choice, right? Because we can't imagine Jesus lusting because it completely has a negative connotation in our context. And yet, that's the word that Luke says he uttered with respect to that moment with his beloved breaking bread.
So that's a great anecdote to bring up, and it's going to illuminate, I think, quite a bit of the other strands of the conversation in the following way. If you go with a Catholic or Orthodox or Anglican view of the sacrament, then let's think about what's happening in that text.
Yeah.
This is Thursday night.
Yep.
Jesus is breaking. He's fervent. All of this is a result, by the way, of his fervent desire, of his almost erotic, ecstatic love for everything that's going to come about from this.
Right.
Wow. That's the real ground of creation from nothing. He says, he breaks the bread, he gives thanks to God, he breaks the bread and says, this is my body, which is broken for you. In the present tense. It is broken. And then here's the cup. This is my blood, which is poured out or shed for you. Well, no, it's not. Because that won't happen until the next day. If you think that, though, those traditions with the sacrament, what you have is that Jesus Christ instituted the Eucharist.
Yes.
So that's what, he himself is the first one to give his body and his blood. But the body he's given is broken. The blood he's given is shed. And he gives it on the day before his body is broken and his blood is shed. Which means his very ability to institute the Eucharist assumes a sort of time bending, which is that you can't give a body that's a broken body that's not yet broken, and you can't give shed blood that's not yet shed unless the broken body and the shed blood that's going to occur in the next day is somehow already retroactively present on Thursday night.
That's awesome.
And so that's awesome. And so he's giving that, and it really is his body which is broken. It really is his blood which is shed. But if you really want to kind of add yet another layer,
I always do.
You always do, and I know that about you. I would say, especially in some of the accounts, right, this act is actually what prompts Judas to depart. Go and do what you must. So that means that Christ instituting the Eucharist on Thursday night becomes the cause, in a way, or co-cause or condition of the chain of events that it sets off that leads to his handing over, that leads to his crucifixion, that leads to the broken body and the shed blood. But so that the result of the crucifixion, and really not just the crucifixion, it's Holy Saturday, it's the resurrection on Sunday, and eventually it's the Ascension, it's the whole sequence. The result of that whole sequence doubles back and is actually the condition of that initiates that same sequence.
Yes.
Because his body and blood have to be broken, already have been actually broken and shed, in order for the sequence that led to his broken body and shed blood. So this is a loop, this is a sort of a bending back. And so, but of course, the most important point of it is that the fervent desire is what really produces the entire sequence and redoubling.
Yes. Yeah.
So the bending of time is a result of Christ's beating heart.
Yes.
That's the way I would want to put it. And what he gives is himself. And what do we receive? we receive his body and his blood. And what happens then? We become his body. So God becomes what God loves. But the only way that can happen is with the concomitant time bending. That's awesome.
I need a second. Yeah, wow. And adjacent to it, but connected with Judas, you know, that I will often have conversations with people who believe Judas is beyond redemption, and yet he was authorized by Jesus because he was told, you know. So I'll ask the question, are we supposed to do what Jesus says? And he said to Judas, go do this.
Yeah, I think so. I'm going to start with an image. I'm not a Eastern Orthodox, although I have a lot of affinities, and I'm often asked if I'm Eastern Orthodox. Not surprising, but some Eastern Orthodox parishes and sanctuaries have they'll have like the sort of the front of where the altar is, above it there's like a big dome, and some of them have Mary sort of there, and so the dome is also sort of a shape of like a womb. So it's a very interesting thing where like the whole sort of service is happening within Mary because Christ is in Mary, and that's the incarnation. It's happening like within the incarnation in a way. And then I've seen a few places that have above the iconostasis is like the little it's like the wall where it has 3 doors that the priests go in and out of. It sort of separates the womb part from the rest of us who are out here. But above the iconostasis, like there's usually a scene of the Last Supper, and you can see Judas there in some sort of act of indicating he's going to betray. And I've always been struck by that because it means that the whole betrayal happens within the incarnation itself, only superintended by and given the conditions for by the incarnation.
Yes.
And so, of course, you know where I will go with this, where I think he doesn't have a problem with saying to Judas, go do what you must, because he knows that the thing Judas thinks he's going to accomplish will actually not accomplish that thing, and in fact will eventually accomplish the salvation of Judas himself. So that's another aspect to all this that actually does get very existential and immediate and practical, is what Maximus would call God's play. The word plays, he says, in all things, where there's a kind of, even in the midst of the most sincere and grave moments, there is God has this sort of infinite ability to release and be unanxious and ungrasping, as opposed to Adam and Eve who grasped the fruit. God is not hasty, God is not grasping or acquisitive, exactly because God has no anxiety about the end and the perfection. So however it goes, whatever we need or don't need down to the person in order to develop and become who we really are, God has himself become the condition for that whole process, even his own betrayal. Even if it includes his own betrayal. Right. He himself is the condition of those who resist him, their resistance. So he gives himself to such a degree that he even gives himself for those who betray him. Right.